I think I've finally accepted the fact that Fire Force will not be the show I truly want it to be. Going in, I think I wanted this series to be a riveting battle shonen with emotional depth, where the constant threat of human combustion weighs over the characters and the world, adding extra meaning to the job of a fire soldier and perhaps even distorting what it means to actually be a hero, as these are real people that you're putting to rest. At the very least, using the stark contrast of Shinra's desire to save the world against the reality of a fairly bleak world. What we've gotten, 48 episodes in now, is a show I think best described as an entertaining B-movie action flick that sometimes drags you along simply to see how ridiculous and over-the-top it can get. I don't think this is a bad thing, and as I've said before, I think Fire Force is a good show. It's just that Season 2 taught me that I will not be getting the show I had held out hope for when I talked about the first season back in July. And I just felt like I had to come to terms with that before I can accurately describe how I feel about Season 2. And now having done that, I'm happy to report that Season 2 was an improvement over Season 1 almost across the board. My main complaint from Season 1 was that the show undercut its biggest moments too often, and for the most part in Season 2, that was far less of an issue. We got fights with more serious tones, more character backstory, and a couple genuinely great scenes. The couple of episodes about Joker in the middle of the season were some of the most compelling content the series has provided so far, and were just a ridiculous stylistic flex from David Production. In fact, the whole season had crazy shots and hot animation, as my issues with Season 1's direction were absolutely obliterated. This show is legitimately beautiful a lot of the time, and it is honestly impressive how good all the pyrokinetic abilities look. As far as my other big complaint goes, Tamaki is an actual character now. It still doesn't really excuse the usage of her throughout the show, but by the end of Season 2, she's an actual character with backstory, interesting motivation, and a desire to improve. For the amount I ragged on her in Season 1, I want to commend that, if nothing else. But while the quality of the show got better, the foundation that was laid in Season 1 remains unchanged, which means that at its core, Fire Force will always be Fire Force. I was hopeful that when the show began to expand outside of its early stage shonen trappings, it would be able to branch out and improve. While the plot got more interesting and the cast a bit more diverse, it still feels very much the same as an experience. For a longer running show, one of the most important things you can do is make it so the audience becomes attached to your characters. This then allows you to seamlessly add weight to any interaction as the viewers care about the characters regardless of the circumstance. As I was mulling on the series at the end of the season, I realized that I still really don't have much of a connection to anyone outside of Shinra, Benimaru, and maybe Obi. This probably has to do with Season 1's constant obsession with undercutting a potentially endearing scene to make a joke. This is certainly why Arthur remains in a weird no man's land in my mind. I like him, but also don't feel attached because the show just keeps making him look stupid. But I think this is why the show just doesn't hit as deeply for me as some of my other favorite shonens do. I don't have any feeling of investment or stakes whenever there's a fight. I also really wanted to make the sweeping statement that Fire Force just isn't a show that can properly handle the concept of death, but I know that it can because there have been some standout moments early in the series and even this season centered around that. It's just at times it either ignores its own circumstances, like when a bunch of Infernals show up and the cast just mows them down, or plays it off for laughs, like in the second Nether arc. That entire arc is a lot of the reason why Barely was added to the title of this video. To be transparent, 19 episodes into the season, I was pretty certain this video was going to be along the lines of Fire Force is so good now, where I was just going to sing the praises of Season 2 for 5 to 7 minutes. Then the next 3 episodes gave me severe whiplash multiple times, and I was forced to contemplate the season a bit more. I think this arc was just the epitome of what frustrates me about Fire Force. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to be taking seriously and what was supposed to just be comedic. Those joke cutaways to the crewmen putting up death flags before dying could have been funny, but wound up being maybe the most jarring scene in the entire series, especially given the gruesomeness of their deaths and how the zombie angle was supposed to be taken seriously. It just felt like a scene where a large number of crewmen were killed was a slam dunk for a serious, even despair-level tone, particularly as it comes just a few episodes after Shinra emphasizing that he wants to save everyone, and a legit very good scene at the baptism church. Instead, it almost felt like they wanted the Benny Hill theme playing during parts of it before pulling it all back and making it serious and apocalyptic at the end. The only parts I enjoyed were when it got so ridiculous it crossed back over into being good again, like with Giovanni being a literal bug man and the Juggernaut Stay Puft Marshmallow Man fight. It's just in such a juxtaposition from the Hajime arc that preceded it, where I felt like the show finally hit its stride in marrying the goofy and hype sides of its storytelling. I think that arc taught me that the show can really shine when its circumstances are a bit more over the top instead of trying to play it straight but constantly breaking character. It was as if after many misfires, nature was finally healing. And then the Nether reminded me that I was ignoring its inadequacies because it had a bit nicer of a coat of paint on it. At the end of the day, the show will never truly be able to shed the writing style of author Atsushi Okubo, no matter how much flash David Production fills the adaptation with. This sounds a lot harsher than I mean it, but my biggest complaints often boil down to Okubo's perchance to mix comedic elements into more serious moments. I don't think this inherently makes a show bad, but it's so often at odds with the subject matter on display in Fire Force and, more importantly, butts up against my personal tastes a bit too often. But again, that's just me. Overall, I think Season 2 was a step in the right direction, and I think Fire Force has rightfully settled into a sub-tier of shonen anime. It's not quite as popular as your Black Clovers or your My Heroes, but just looking at Season 1's stats, I can't say it didn't find an audience. But I do stand by my thought that it had a chance to be the next big thing, but just missed the mark early on. I do think it will stand the test of time in the way that a show like Blue Exorcist has. It'll be constantly recommended for people that love shonen, but not talked about overwhelmingly outside those circles. However, that might be a little unfair to Blue Exorcist, as it's in the top 25 in popularity on Mao with nearly 1.4 million members, and perhaps one day we'll get a Season 3, who knows? Maybe a show more like Owari no Seraph is a better comp here, with a lot of community hype during Season 1 and seemingly so little now. I don't know. I think Fire Force probably falls somewhere in between those two very extreme examples, and remains a show that occasionally comes up in conversation, even if that conversation leads to, oh, I tried watching that in 2019, I wasn't really feeling it. As for me, I'm going to watch Fire Force Season 3 if or when it comes out, and I'll probably have a good time with it. But what Season 2 reinforced for me was that while I'll enjoy the fights and the art direction and music, I'll also find myself shaking my head at some plot contrivance or mistimed joke. Fire Force will remain a show that's enjoyable, but a bit of a guilty pleasure for me, and it's just unfortunate that that's all it will ever be.